Hello, hello. Okay, so today we're talking all about multiply to simplify. No, simplify to multiply. Simplify to multiply. Gosh, I have my notes here. And I wanted to go over three kind of key components, and I'm going to give you some examples for this particular topic because I think sometimes we are trying to do way too many things all at the same time. And instead of it creating more momentum, what it ends up doing is that it actually defeats the purpose of what it is that we're taking steps on. Now, that being said, sometimes it makes sense for us to do multiple things at the same time. But typically, what I have found from my experience in working with clients now over decades, right? Like this is not like a newfound revelation that I'm sharing with you, is that oftentimes it really depends on what the intention is. And the other piece is whether or not you are simply just throwing spaghetti against the wall. Like, do you have an idea of what it is that the outcome is designed to produce, right? Like what the activity is and then what you're expecting. And then there's always an element of the unknown, the magical, mysterious, miraculous, which I account to faith. So if you're brand new to me, my name is Susan McVeigh. I'm a married mama of two, and I am a business, sales, and wealth strategist and a kingdom business builder. So today we're talking about simplifying things in order to be able to multiply. And I really wanted to talk about the concept of focus, which I talked about, I think, last week, and how focus creates momentum, because momentum is really the opposite of inertia. Inertia means that you are stuck, right? It's different than just being still. Now, when you are doing things, there are going to be times where you need to wait, where there is stillness, where there is receptivity to what it is that's going on around you. And there is a process of refinement in order to allow you to kind of see the path forward. When we are simply just throwing spaghetti against the wall, to me, that tells us that, number one, do you even know what you're doing? And number two, why? Like, where is that coming from? Does this make sense? And I think sometimes, because I've been guilty of it, and a lot of my clients identify as multi-passionate people, right? Where you have lots of things on the go, you have lots of different interests, you have lots of different talents. Like you have different experiences, you have different talents, you have different abilities, you have different gifts. And sometimes it can be difficult to narrow it down and say, like, what is it that I'm supposed to be working on? And what I want you to do right now is, number one, I want you to see, am I doing all of these things simply because I am afraid? Am I leading with an intention of, if I don't do this, then I will miss out on this? Okay, because that can often lead us to doing way too many things all at once. Now, there could be control issues behind that. There could be boundary issues behind that, meaning, so I'll give you an example. And let me know in the comments if you're on here live, if you're on the replay, if this kind of describes the season of life that you're in, or if you struggle with this, okay? Because just because you're capable of doing something doesn't mean that you're supposed to be the one doing it. So as the eldest of three, and I've shared multiple times, but I want you to think back to how you were as a kid and what are some of the things that you've just done without really questioning why you're doing it, right? And because a lot of things that we do today are not always things that we fully understand or can appreciate. They are habitual, they are unconscious, they are things that we don't often think about or even spend time to reflect upon. And what served us in the past may not serve you today. And it certainly might not serve you moving forward, which is why I'm here today. Because I think sometimes how we identify and how we see ourselves, and more importantly, how other people see us, can keep us stuck into patterns and situations and even circumstances and relationships that we have outgrown. So, as the eldest of three, my parents were immigrants to Canada. And when I was growing up, I was the main interpreter. Hello, hello. Gary, so nice to see you. And as a result, I have been speaking for most of the people in my life for most of my life, like since I basically could speak. So I have to pay attention because if I start to speak for other people, I remove the opportunity for them to learn a skill, right? So my kids are 15 and 17, and in some ways it's control, right? But I don't want to control my children. I don't want to control my clients. I don't want to control you. I want to empower them, right? That is one of the key assignments that I have here on earth, is to empower the people around me. So my behavior, right? My behavior of trying to speak up for other people, it's a role that I have played my entire life. It's something that I'm familiar with. It's something that I have always done. But just because I've always done it doesn't mean that I should continue to do it. Does this make sense? So I have to catch myself, because when we are in public situations, guess who doesn't speak up? Everybody. Because they're used to me speaking for them. So then I can't complain that I'm the only one who speaks, or I'm the only one who asks the questions, if I haven't given other people an opportunity to do that, right? And in the short term, it's going to feel like more work, because in order to simplify my life, which means, hey, I'm not the mouthpiece for every single person. I am now empowering and building the skills and the capabilities for the people around me. Then they have to have time to practice that, right? And I create a safe enough environment where they can do that. But then I also have to be willing to let go of the control of whatever they come up with is good, right? Like I can't then pass judgment and say, oh, you didn't do that right. Because guess what's going to happen? They're not going to want to do it again, right? So I can't do all of these things that I'm used to doing. And I can't also look at them and judge them according to me now, gosh, almost 50 years of living and 50 years worth of practicing this skill of communication and talking to adults from when I was right? Like basically 2-3 years old, I would have to speak up for my parents. And then subsequently my younger siblings. That's a lot of practice. So I can't expect that my 15-year-old or even my 17-year-old, even my husband, right, who happens to be older than me, that they would have the same level of skill set because they haven't practiced it. Now, the other fun part is, in the world of business and in sales, I have spoken to hundreds of thousands of people in my lifetime, because every single week I had the responsibility, I had the expectation that for 20 years of my life, I would speak to a minimum of 40 people, like conversations. But when I first started my career, it wouldn't be unheard if I spoke to 100 to 300 people a week. Okay. Now I know some of you are in the public arena, meaning like you're interacting with customers too, right? If you are in any sort of customer service job, I want you to think like these are the skill sets that you've already developed. Now, I don't know who this is for because this is not part of my notes. I was talking about the momentum of focus, and that sometimes when we are going through life, just moment by moment, we mistake that for momentum, because we're simply going along with our unconscious competence, like the things that we do naturally well. And if you continually just do it unconsciously without creating some awareness around it, you're going to just keep adding more and 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 more. And that more is not actually what creates a multiplication. Does this make sense? And I know that it sounds paradoxical. I know that it sounds a little opposite, because you would think logically that the more that I do, the more that I get, because that's what multiplication is. No, multiplication does not work that way. Okay. And when we think about how things truly multiply, it's the ability to find the key components of things that actually are what makes it work and combining them together. We don't add, because that's what we're doing when we are like overwhelmed with too many things. That doesn't create momentum. That creates burnout. That creates a overwhelm. That creates stalling. Like if you were to overload your car with as much stuff that you could cram into your car, as much as you push down on the gas pedal, right? You're not going to go as fast as if it's just you and maybe a passenger sitting beside you, right? There's less weight. Like logically, we understand that. And yet physically, in the here and now, we try to do the opposite. We actually try to cram as much stuff as possible because we don't want to leave something behind. That's the stuff that I'm trying to talk about today, which is you got to get rid of the baggage, because in this new era of wherever you're going into, I guarantee you that that is not going to work. And so today there's going to be a strategic, logical, brain-based, like a scientific component. Because I'm going to invite you to understand how we behave as human beings, right? And look at that from a very logical, linear brain, like why your brain does this. And then the other component is going to be a spiritual component, because everything on earth, there is a 3D, like here's the book. And then there is where did the book come from? Sort of spiritual lens, okay? Because not everything that is seen is real, and not everything that is unseen is not real. Okay. So that's the lens that I'm going to be sharing all of the information that I speak on moving forward, so that there's a clarity for everybody. So, because there is going to be things where you're going to sit here and go, huh? But if you stop overthinking it, your spirit will receive it. And if you believe in God and Jesus, the Holy Spirit will guide you. And I just have full faith and trust in knowing that whoever is meant to hear this is going to receive it. Okay. So this is my arena that God has given to me, which is neuro spirituality. That's my domain. Okay. Hello, Sigbodi, Muzi events. So I want you to, number one, in order to simplify, where you're going to get the biggest results and create momentum, in order for you to actually focus and double down on what is getting you results, is I want you to identify the right problem. Because too often what ends up happening is that we are throwing spaghetti against the wall because you don't know what problem you're trying to fix. And this is not about, and I've talked about this many, many times, and I will continue to talk about it. This is not about you going to look for problems, and there is nothing wrong with you. Like, you are not a problem. Does this make sense? And I know, because sometimes the things that I say, it's going to sound like I'm contradicting myself. I'm going to say certain things in order to break apart certain mindsets and beliefs, so that you have an awakening of self. Okay. And sometimes that language is going to come through in different patterns, so that it makes the most sense for whoever is on here or whoever is going to be on here at some point in the future. So you'll get it when you get it. That's all I can say. If you believe that you're the problem, you will continually make problems, because everywhere you go, there you are. So that's why I'm saying, do not go looking for the problem. You already know that there is a problem, right? If you identify as the problem, if you identify that you are a problem solver, then you are continually going to make problems happen so that you can go and solve them. that was for someone. So step one, identify the right problem. Because if we don't identify the right problems, then we are going to try and fix everything for everyone. And this goes for wealth, this goes for your health, this goes for your business, this goes for your life, this goes for your relationships, this goes for every arena. Okay? Who here has too much on their plate? Who here could actually deal with getting some stuff taken off your plate? And so if you feel like, how could I possibly do that? Like, Susan, there's nothing I can get rid of because I'm gonna drop a ball somewhere, right? Like something's gonna get missed. I really encourage you to sit down, spend some time reflecting, and identify whether or not that statement is true. Because you might feel like it's true. You may be telling your brain fake news, and your brain may be telling you fake news because it's a pattern. It may be something that was done before, and you're bringing that old news into the present and into the future, right? From a spiritual perspective, I guarantee there is doubt attached to that, and there's probably fear. Now, in the Bible, it says God does not give us a spirit of fear, but power, love, and a sound mind. So if your mind is not working correctly, right? And that happens for all kinds of causes. You could be stressed out today. Somebody could have yelled at you. You may have, dropped a plate and just all of a sudden, oh gosh, and it could have triggered some memories from the past. Whatever the case may be, when we take opportunities to just stop and reflect and identify what is the problem right now, right? Like, what is the problem? What am I reacting to? Because when we do that, then we allow ourselves to focus on the right things at the right time. And sometimes we're focusing on the wrong things at the wrong time in the wrong order. And it doesn't allow us to simplify. It doesn't allow us to then multiply because we don't know what's working, what's not working. So identification of the right problem may sound simple, but I guarantee you, if you do this today, you will likely identify, oh, I'm dealing with something that I shouldn't even be dealing with. Okay. Now, if you are an empathetic person, if you are somebody who deeply feels for other human beings, which we all have empathy, but there are some of us that have deep connections and feelings to other people, such that we almost take on their own situations and circumstances and the burdens of those around us, especially those that we care for, especially those who we actually do take care of, right, as caregivers. It weighs on you. It weighs on your spirit. It weighs on your physical body. It could weigh on your soul. And it just permeates who you are. Here's an additional question that will help you. Does this belong to me? Does this belong to me? Because again, if you create some space and you stop and you ask yourself that question. So first, are you identifying the right problem? And then number two, for those who have a deeper level of empathy, ask, does this belong to me? Because sometimes the things that you're feeling, they're not even yours. They could belong to your kids. They could belong to your husband or your spouse. They could belong to your colleagues at work. They could belong to your clients. They could belong to somebody that you just interacted with on social media. They could belong to the news. They could belong to your parents. They could belong to your family history. They could belong to the place where you physically live. We lived in a house before this one because we were moving. We had moved from my hometown where I had grown up for 40 plus years and moved across the water, partly because God said. Now, I know why he did this. Okay, I'm not going to go into all those details. But what I will say is the house that we lived in prior to here had violent things being done in the house. How do I know? Because I could feel it and I could see it and I could sense it. And more importantly, my whole family could. There were weird things that were going on, right? I'm going to be very careful of how I word these because we're on a public platform. So there were lots of times where I had unsettled sleep. I had weird dreams or nightmares. I would see things in the shadows lurking during the day, right? And for a long time, because this was years ago, I didn't know that was not me. Okay? Because I'm the type of person that takes personal responsibility for everything that I touch. And while that has served me well, that is not the era that I am in now. That is not the season that God is moving me into. And as a result, it's really now more about empowering other people with the learnings and the wisdom and the understanding that I have, the experience that I've gained because I've practiced this out. So that was the question that I had to continually ask. Does this belong to me? Is this even mine? Okay. And it takes practice. It takes discernment, and it takes really calibrating into who you are and whose you are and fully understanding what to let go and release. But it takes practice. It is an ongoing practice. And so once you've identified what the right problem is, then you ask yourself, does this belong to me? Because sometimes we're holding on to problems that don't belong to us. Like, it's not yours to solve. It is not your burden to bear. The Bible says, cast your cares over to the Lord. Some of us, like, that's maybe a practice that you need to just get into the habit of is, this is not my responsibility. Like, this belongs to somebody else. And then we can ask further follow-on questions to assess then who is supposed to be responsible for this. So that begs the question, where does faith come in? Well, it leads kind of naturally, doesn't it? Because if you've identified the right problem and you're doing your part to solve the problem, which truthfully, there's not a lot that you can do. Now, I know that you can do lots of things. So I'm not speaking to you can't do a lot. I'm saying that just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? That directly leads to burnout and exhaustion and resentment. How many of us have gone through a period of life where you're doing too much and you resent it, right? Like, it leads to unhappiness. It leads to unfulfillment. It leads to you not being able to do what it is that you want or that you're called to do. It leads to you being grumpy, right? Like, just dissatisfied. Well, that's not the kind of life that we are meant to live. Now, does that mean that everything that we do at any given time is going to be, I'm galloping through the fields like I have flowers in my hair and the wind, like I'm on a stage with the wind machine, like, look at me? No. Because the reality is that when we do things differently, and we are constantly being challenged to do new things, right? Because if you are an innovator, if you are a creator, if you are a pioneer, then you will be doing new things all the time. But it's not from a place of, I have to, because I'm missing something, because we're trying to solve the world's problems. We are solving the right problems with our right tools and skill sets. We're being activated in our own natural talents, abilities, and the experiences that God has given to us and placed within us so that we can help us first and then the people around us, right? So we can't do that if we're trying to be all things to all people at all times. This is why simplification immediately leads to multiplication, because I guarantee you that when you simplify, you actually are going to get to the core of what it is that you're here on the earth to do. And that's a scary thing for some people. It certainly was for me. It's scary to be called out. Like, that literally is by definition what's happening. So I looked in the Bible actually, because where was I? Oh, I didn't write down this scripture, but I want everybody to go to Ephesians 4 and 7. But unto every one of us is given grace according to the measure of the gift of Christ. Okay? Because grace and faith go hand in hand, right? Grace and faith go hand in hand, because it's, was it by faith in grace, in faith by grace? I always get these words mixed up, but you know what I'm talking about. When we receive faith, we also receive grace. Grace is the unmerited favor of God. It literally means that there is nothing that we do to receive it. There is no way for us to pay back grace. Like that, right there, it's an unequal exchange. So when we receive grace, we do so by faith. And that means that we have to believe beyond belief, like beyond perception, beyond imagination, beyond logic and reasoning, beyond the scope of where our brains are. So our brains can only take us so far. And that's why for me, I'm speaking out a lot about neurospirituality. That is the domain that God has given to me, because our brains are amazing, right? But our brains are very complex, and human nature is such that in order for it to feel like we have earned it, or that it is hard work, like these are all terms that we have probably grown up hearing, probably still speaking about. And yet the Bible says, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. Right? So God is literally saying, when you partner with me, when you allow me to work through you, in you, with you, that it's easy. In essence, it should feel effortless, because we are given revelations and understanding that goes beyond the human perception, that goes beyond the human brain. The human brain can do lots of things, though, don't get me wrong, right? Because without wisdom, we don't have knowledge or understanding. Well, wisdom alone is not enough. Wisdom alone, and even knowledge alone, is meaningless. Like you coming here and then gaining some wisdom from me that I'm passing along, you coming here and gaining some knowledge that maybe you didn't have before, is all well and good. But until you apply that for yourself, you will never have a full understanding. That's why there's different words for the same sort of idea, right? Why do we have the word wisdom? Why do we have the word knowledge? Why do we have the word understanding? Why do we even have the word experience? Because we are told that we need to be doers of the word and not just hearers of the word. And that means that we physically must do a thing in order to receive the thing that we are meant to receive. And part of that is get you understanding, right? That is the most important part of our walk here on earth, is that the more we understand, the more that we will manifest all of the goodness of God. And it is not about doing 100 billion things, because our revelations should actually guide our steps such that we only do the things that God has designed for us and not for anybody else. And if we do that, then according to Ephesians 4 and 7, but unto every one of us is given grace according to the measure of the gift of Christ. Now, when we are called, because a lot of people throw around these words, right? I'm called, like, this is my calling. Did you know that calling, actually, the Hebrew word, one of the definitions is invitation to feast. Invitation to feast. And to be called is actually to be invited. You are invited, you are actually called by name. So I've used this analogy before, right? Like if you're a parent, so I have kids. Now, my kids are older, they're 15 and 17. But even now, like if they are out and about and they call my name, they call me, right? When they were little, they used to call me mama. And now it's no longer cool to call me mama. So apparently I'm mom, which I'm okay with, but I always refer to myself as mama. Okay. In case I use those interchangeably and you're like, is she confused? No, I'm not confused. My name for myself relative to my kids is mama. Their name for me has evolved. That's a word for somebody. Their name for me has evolved to mom. Okay. But if I was at school, we're all moms. Right? Like we're all moms. How do I know my kid? Right? They're going to call me by my name. They're going to call me by my name. I know my name according to how they call me. Does this make sense? If God is calling you, he is inviting you. Where is he inviting you? Well, to your calling. Your calling is an invitation to your feast. Go to Psalm 23. The Lord prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies. There's a feast prepared for you, right? Somebody just got it. Somebody just got like this whole revelation. So just like a measure of faith, we receive a measure of grace according to the gift of Christ. So that means that we let go of the fear that we're not doing enough. We do what God tells us to do, what you're led to do in the here and now by your spirit. If you're a believer, by his spirit also. But whether you call it intuition or spirit, there is a small, still part of you that when you have the opportunity to be still, to let go, to stop being afraid of not being enough or doing enough or having enough or like it's not going to work, that if you actually focus on the two questions that I gave you at the beginning, which I'll repeat here. Number one, are you identifying the right problem? Right? And number two, once you've identified the right problem, does it belong to you? Because too often we're taking on problems that have nothing to do with us. How many times are you getting involved in a social media squabble that you have nothing to do with? And guess what ends up happening? It impacts your brain. Don't believe me? Go and Google it. There's proven science that every time you interact with certain types of behaviors, you are firing off brain chemicals. And it is an addictive process, right? And part of the reason why we're on social media is designed to trigger brain chemicals, mostly dopamine, but other ones as well, such that you cannot let go. If you have addictive types of personalities, some of it is just you inherently, that's the way that you're wired. However, some of it you've inherited because these are patterns of behavior that nobody has broken, right? Behaviors can change. They change typically very slowly, which is why habits are hard to form. The reason why habits are hard to form is because most of us are going through life unconsciously. We're not thinking about what we're doing. We just are doing them without actually questioning why. Why am I doing this? What am I doing? Does it even make sense? Is it even what I want to do? And too often we're going around doing things that are expected of us by other people, by the places that we live in, by the people that we live around, by society, by our families, right? By all kinds of stuff. I feel like I had a conversation with somebody recently, and because I have a bunch of interns right now. Hold on, water. And the number one question I ask them when they're working on a project for me, because I love mentorship, I'm very good at it. I've been doing it since I was, my whole life, because I have two younger siblings and I have a whole whack of younger cousins. Okay. I have a very, very big extended family. And so the number one question I ask them is, how does this project help you? Right? Like, how does it align to your future goals? And several of them, I'd say 80% of them, are like, oh, I don't know. I said, well, take your time, maybe think about it. Because it's one thing to be guided and led, right? And to not fully understand why we're doing something, that's grace and faith, right? Now, the more that you spend time with yourself, the more that know yourself, the stronger that trust muscle is within yourself, so that as you sit through and you're even listening to me right now, you're going to immediately recognize, oh, I need to get rid of this. I need to get rid of this. Like, maybe today my message is just confirming for you. Yep. Got to get rid of that. Got to, I need to pare down, pare down, pare down. I need to simplify. But for some of you, it's going to be, oh, you're going to hear a different message, which is going to feel contradictory to what I'm saying, which is why I'm being led to mention it here. You need to double down on the things. And actually, in your case, you're being asked to do many things, multiple things, but they're all related. They're all related. You might not know that they're related, or maybe you do, but I guarantee you that there is a rhyme and a reason for why you're doing certain things. And some of it you may not know until the end, because your faith is required. Your obedience is required. Your doing is required. And you're not being shown how these all connect yet. But I guarantee you, because right now you're like, but I know that I know. And I know that God has asked me to do all of these different things. Here's the difference. One is going to be led by fear, and I shared this at the beginning, where you are throwing spaghetti against the wall and you're like, I don't know if anything's going to work, so I'm just going to try and do all of it because I can't afford for none of it to work. I've shared multiple times where when clients have come to me, they are burnt out and exhausted because they're in this state. They're like, oh my gosh, like I just can't keep doing this anymore because I want to enjoy my life. I'm like, yeah, you should, right? Like, if it took you, let's say 80 hours to get to $250,000 worth of income a year, this is like true story, 60 to 80 hours working around the clock, that may have been required to get you to a certain point. Because here's the thing, when you are learning new skills and doing new skills at the same time, you are doing double the work, because you have to learn it at the same time that you then have to still implement it, right? It takes you 2 times to 3 times, sometimes 4 times as long, depending on your natural skill set and your ability. In addition to, you're going to make mistakes. So you're going to need to fix your mistakes as you go along. You're going to need to get over your frustration. That also takes some time. Again, it's going to depend on your own natural resources for how quickly you can bounce back. This comes down to perseverance and resilience. How anti-fragile are you? Okay. Meaning, if something was to take somebody down, does it actually make you stronger? Like, I am an anti-fragile personality. I know that the things that are designed to take other people down actually make me stronger. It takes me time to get over it, to like integrate it, but it makes me stronger. How do I? Because I'm still here. There literally have been multiple attempts on my life through my entire life. Okay. Maybe I'll share those another day. But like, as an example, I've been in a knife fight. Nobody would suspect that I've been in a knife fight and I've won. Obviously I won. I'm here. Okay. I've been in 3 major car accidents in my life. One of which was with the jaws of life. I don't remember. I just woke up in the hospital. Okay. So I share that to give you context, because I know that whatever it is that you have gone through, sometimes we are so stuck on it and we are so regretful, because that's the enemy coming. That's that's also our human brain trying to wrap its head around the trauma. And there are physical impacts that happen with trauma, big T and little t. Okay. I'm not trying to belittle it. I've gone through it, my own versions of it. So wherever you are, I want you to give yourself grace. It's the unmerited favor of God. It's knowing that when I am weak, he is strong. And so I don't have to have it all put together. I can focus on fixing me. And I say that kind of tongue in cheek because there's nothing wrong with me. But if I was to burn my hand on the stove, then I would have to fix the burn, right? Like there would be a physical evidence. The mental, emotional, and spiritual trauma that's done that we receive through no fault of our own, right? They leave imprints the same way that a burn will burn your hand. The scars are invisible. I have multiple invisible illnesses that nobody would ever know. Now, by the grace of God, he's healed me from all these symptoms. But it doesn't mean that that scar tissue doesn't sometimes get a little funky if something else happens that's very similar, because my brain doesn't remember that it is completely healed. It still thinks, wait, last time this happened, this was not good. And I've talked about this before. Your brain really has one function: to keep you alive for another day, right? And so anytime that it thinks, because it's trigger happy, anytime it thinks, danger, 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 it's going to shut you down. And it's going to immediately create patterns of behavior, because those are the grooves that our brains operate on. It's called neuroplasticity. Go and you Google it, okay? And it's like driving down the interstate. Those highways are paved and they're really easy to drive, versus it would be like you stopping the car on the interstate and saying, like literally stopping, and cars are going and they're like, what are you doing? Like, get off the road. And you're thinking, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be on this road. I need to take a detour. And then you're like, wait, how do I get off this road? And then, right? So I want you to literally think, how difficult would that be? Well, pretty dang hard, right? Because now you got to navigate all this stuff. But the more that you do that, the more that you actually are going to be driving down other paths and creating new pathways, new neural pathways, such that your brain actually wants to do that. So now my default pattern is peace. It's what I wrote down in my journal back in 2015 when I had a breakdown. All I wanted was to calm my mind. It was racing a mile a minute. I had to simplify it in order to multiply, because the minute I did that, so number one, when I first started in my health, because I had a breakdown, I tried everything because I was afraid. I was afraid that nothing was going to work. And I was afraid that if I didn't do all of these things, that I would never get better, that I was going to stay broken. Okay. So that's the difference of intention. If you're trying all these things because you're afraid, I guarantee you, none of it's going to work very well. Because you won't be able to let go. And that's not a life. That is a jail. I'm going to say that again. That is not a life. That is a jail. It doesn't matter if it's your relationships. It doesn't matter if it's your job or your business. It doesn't matter if it's your money. It doesn't matter if it's your health, right? These are the big three: your money, love, and health. You're stuck in a jail. And sometimes it's like you made it. And so you feel so invested, you can't let go. I'm going to encourage you. I'm going to encourage you to let it go, right? This is a simplification. And even if you just take but a moment to breathe, who's on here right now? You need to take a breath because you feel stuck, okay? There is no situation that God cannot jailbreak you out of. And if that's you, you need to go and watch the last 2 videos that I've done on my page here. Okay. So when I first started my health situation, I tried everything. And the minute that it shifted for me was when I stopped being attached to whether or not it would work. We'll do a whole video on that another day. Okay. If I forget, can somebody send me a message on like not being attached to the outcomes? Because it's really important. Okay. And it's a spiritual law. It's a spiritual principle. Same thing for my wealth. As much as you want to hear people say millionaires have 7 or 8 income streams, yeah, they do. But I could also find you many, many millionaires that got to be a millionaire with 1 or 2 income streams. Most of them got it through their job or their business. Number 1, that was me. I did not have a business to create my first million in net worth. Let me be very clear. I'm not talking about sales. I'm not talking about revenue. I'm not talking about, because I made way more than $1 million by the time I had $1 million in net worth. Net worth is what you own minus what you owe. Okay? What you own minus what you owe. So to me, a millionaire is somebody who has $1 million in net worth. What you own minus what you owe. Okay? I did it with 1 income stream, a job. My job, which I did not make 6 figures for most of my career. And my inspiration was a school teacher that I saw on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Now, don't come at me for the Oprah connection, whatever. Okay. When I was a child, this school teacher, she retired a millionaire. And I didn't know any millionaires at the time. And I thought, if she can do it and she's never made more than $23,000, I'm going to make more than $23,000. I can do that. I can do it before she did it. If she retired at 65, I'm going to do it by the time I'm 40. I never even considered that I could be a millionaire by the time I was, 20, 25. And I did. With 1 income stream, my job. Because I was a good steward and I learned how to discipline myself with self-control over my money. It was a skill I needed to learn. So managing your money is a skill set. Growing your money is a skill set. Investing your money is a skill set. Making money is also a skill set. Doing sales is a skill set. Most of the things that we are so upset about in us as like character flaws, they're not character. It is a skill. You're missing a skill. You need to go and learn how to do a skill. And then recognize that it may take more time because you have to learn how to do it. And then you have to do the doing of it at least double the time. Okay? So I'm giving you examples so that you understand that just because people say these things doesn't mean that it applies to you. Okay? And again, what I'm sharing here, it may or may not apply to you. I don't know. I don't know you. I literally don't know you. And even if I know you, I don't know everything about you. The only people who should be giving you very specific advice are people that you, number 1, typically have some kind of a relationship with. And number 2, you have paid. Because typically that level of advice, that level of customization, you don't get for free. I have an investment advisor. That's what I did for 20 years. I pay them a lot of money to manage a lot of my money. And I say that because you do get what you pay for. That being said, there are opportunities for you to find people at all levels Okay. So this is not a situation of like pay more without using wisdom, without being discerning, without using guidance, especially if you do believe in God, from God. Sometimes we just jump the gun and we're like, oh, they look good, they sound good, right? Why do I show up like this? Because this is how I dress. I am an everyday millionaire. I'm like a millionaire next door. I want you to know that just because people look a certain way or talk a certain way or act a certain way doesn't mean that that's who they are. We need to be very careful, right? And that's why I always say, you can always test me. Well, totally fine. And I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I'm okay with that too. I am only made for very specific people of action, people who are ambitious, people who are faith driven and spirit led, and people who understand that it takes work. Does it have to be hard? No, but it may feel hard because you're doing it for the first, second, third, fourth time. It's new, right? I work with people who are learners and I work with people who are leaders. You're high achievers because that's who I am. I work with people who are like me because I get to choose now. Like that's the reality of life. Okay. If you're a business owner, you also get to work with whoever you want. And you may be right now on here because you are working with people that you don't want to work with simply because you need to get paid. That's the worst way to build a business, let me tell you, because you're going to create a jail of your own making. And I've seen it happen time and time and time again. And then you are trapped because you can't afford to let go of the people who are paying your bills. Right? In business, this is my last example. When I started in the online space, I knew nothing about online marketing. I knew about marketing because that's my background. My background is actually marketing and sales, consumer behavior. And I've had decades practicing this. But I didn't realize that these were like part of my natural gifts and talents and then learned experience. So when I came online, and this is a teaching within a teaching, okay? So I want you to hear me very clearly, because if I need to come back on and explain this, I will. I saw too many ambitious, driven, motivated female entrepreneurs who were great at what they do, but struggling to make as much money as they could because they were feeding into the hype that more is better. Okay, that more is better. So they were looking for more leads. And I bought into this and I know better. Okay, this is how insidious the industry can become and how important it is to be guarded around who you hang around with because it easily can slip into your mind. So when I started talking, and I was the only one, this was 2016-ish. Now I have been talking about serving and selling since 1998, because that's how long I've been teaching other people about sales. I got paid to do that inside of a major corporation, not just I woke up one day and was like, serving is selling. No, it's because I didn't like selling and I'm a servant leader and I needed to figure out how do I combine those two? And I realized, oh, if I give people the solution to their problem, and because that's what sales is, then I'm serving them and I'm serving me because I have goals and I have targets that I have to hit in order to keep my job. So to me, that was a win-win-win. And so that's what I would teach all of my peers, because I became a peer leader and then quickly moved up. So as I evolved, because I quickly became a leader, I said selling is leading. But in the online space, I was the first to say selling is serving. Okay. And I say that because I know. Now, that being said, I was tired of all these women who were focusing on more leads and they weren't making more sales because they didn't know how to sell. And I said, and this was the number one question I asked here on this live, after better if I have more. I logically, my brain says, in order for me to have better results, I need to have more. Do you? Because if we look at the scope of what's going on, like a math equation, there are certain points where things don't make sense. And to me, because this is how my brain is hardwired, strategy is one of my number one gifts, is I saw immediately, if you sell better, instead of 10 leads and you only are selling and closing to 2 out of those 10, which is an average, right? On average, most people will sell about 20%. Knowing nothing about sales, just by sheer kind of luck and chutzpah and just like, please buy from me. 20%. You will convert 20% and get 2 out of 10 people will say yes. I know that because I know my track record. I can double that, easily double that. Like on a bad day, you should be able to close 4 out of 10, right? If you are in charge of your entire end-to-end sales process, including your marketing and your communication, your messaging, how you're showing up, then you could easily get that to 80% or higher. So if you already have 10 leads, wouldn't you just spend the time and the effort and the energy to improve your sales? Because then you don't have to change anything on the front end. You're just tightening up so that you're not leaking, your bucket is leaking with more holes because you simply are missing a skill set rather than expending more effort and energy on the front end to get more leads who may or may not be good quality because you don't know, right? And so that's what I mean by simplifying, because people looked at me and said, how did you get such fast results? Because I focused on the right problem. I focused on who am I helping and who's qualified to work with me? Who do I choose to work with? And I only made offers to those people such that my conversion rates are still, 80, 93%. Now, a lot of people will tell you that's too high. You need to raise your prices. I did, right? I've tested this across the board from like low ticket all the way up. When you identify the right problems for the right people and you only focus on that, you get results. The part that your brain is going to want to get interrupting you in is thinking that's not enough. You won't know until you try it. And that's where faith and grace comes in, because you have to believe in yourself. You also have to believe that what somebody else did, that it's possible for you. The Bible says that God is not a respecter of persons. And that literally means, by spiritual laws and principles, that what he did for somebody else is also 100% possible for us. If we would have the faith and the belief and the trust, not only in ourselves, but also that God can do it. That when we allow ourselves to be used and to do the work, and it will feel hard. Is it hard work? Not always. Not always. But is it hard at first? Yeah. Everything is hard at first because you don't know what you're doing. And more importantly, you're going to have a lot of thoughts and a lot of feelings and a lot of like stuff going around that's going to interfere. It's like trying to tune into a radio signal, and it's like radio, whatever, 98.5 FM. And until you land right on it, 98.3, a little staticky. Maybe if you go to 98.1, you kind of don't hear it at all. And same thing if you go up, right? 98.5 is the radio station that you want. But if you go a little too high and it's 98.7, you may be like, oh, I don't quite hear that either. It's going to take a little bit for you to tune into that. You won't know until you do the reps. And that's why the Bible says that we have to have understanding. You can ask for wisdom and you'll get it. right? My people perish for lack of knowledge. So we can also have the knowledge. But once we have that, the whole point of that is so that we can see clearly that we have a vision, and then we write down what that looks like so that we can run with it. We always talk about vision. We always talk about like write the vision, make it plain, but we forget about the second part, which is so that you can run with it. That's the doing part, the implementation part, the execution. And so if we have too many things that we are trying to run with, then something's going to get missed. You may have multiple things that you're working on right now. I shared this before. I don't know who this is for. It is very important that right now that you look at Ephesians 4:7. But unto every one of us is given grace according to the measure of the gift of Christ. Gifts are something that are given to us, but in order for us to receive the gift, we actually have to receive it. Okay? So if the measure of the gift of Christ is what has been provided, like that's how we get grace, then we actually need to receive the gift. And that's the difference. The measure is according to the gift that we receive. Does this make sense? And that's going to be based off of what your receptivity is. If you're not willing to receive it, then you are going to push away the measure of grace by which God is trying to give. It's the same thing for faith. It's a gift of faith. If you don't receive faith, because there's different things of faith. You have a measure of faith, you have a gift of faith, you have a fruit of faith. I'm talking about the gift, because a gift is given, but if I gave you this gift, in order for me to give it to you, you have to actually do your part. And that means you have to take it from me. You have to receive it from me, right? And if I had three gifts to give you, because maybe I was feeling generous and I was like, oh, I think you could take 3. Like, I want to give you 3, but you only want to take one of those packages. It doesn't matter how much I want to give you. If you're only willing to take one, you're like, oh, no, Susan, that's too many. Like, let me just take one. Then you will only take one, even though I have 3 to give you. Does this make sense? So when we are able to receive the fullness of the gift of grace and faith, which is unmerited favor, is grace. Faith is the substance of things not yet seen, the expectation of things hoped for, right? So if you are expecting little because you have little faith, then you will receive little. You will receive little grace because you won't be able to receive it, not because the Father is not giving it to you. Does this make sense? Like, he really wanted me to make sure that somebody gets this, that if we are blocking how we receive, then we're going to have to do more work. And we actually don't need to do that. That's why we can simplify, because what we need to do is only what we need to do, and then God will do the rest. Now, some of us are being invited, because remember, a calling is an invitation to feast. We're being invited to feast in multiple arenas, and there's different, the analogy that I'm going to give is like you're planting different seeds in different arenas, like different orchards almost. Like, here's a plum tree, here's an apple tree, here's a banana tree, here's a pineapple tree. They're different, but they're all similar because they're all like fruit trees. Okay? You might not understand how they're connected yet, and it may feel like you're doing a lot, but I guarantee you this message of you're simplifying in order to multiply still applies to you. The only way that you're going to know is by spending time with yourself first and foremost, because you need to get rid of all the noise, the clutter, and the extra, and then to allow what you're hearing, discerning, and knowing from what your desires are, right? Because our will always override God's. And if you don't know what your will is, if you don't know what you desire, because that is your will, then you will potentially block what God is trying to give to you. But you first need to acknowledge, what do I want? What am I willing to do? What do I desire? What's deep in my heart? So that I can come and sit with God and say, God, like, here's what's showing up for me. What do you have for me? And to see if you're willing to receive that. Because I guarantee what you want, he has 10 times more. Exceedingly abundantly so, because that's what his word says. Okay? Look at the example of Jesus breaking the bread. If you don't believe me, just go to his word. Look at Jesus multiplying the bread and the fish. That was grace. That was grace. Okay? The measure of the gift of Christ. That was faith in action. And there's a strategy that's broken down straight in scripture. That was the favor of God being demonstrated through Jesus, but he's showing us how to do it. If you don't believe me, you don't need to believe me. There's examples for you to look at. Okay? Go and find them. Meditate upon them. Ask first yourself, what do I need to get rid of? What do I need to simplify? Where am I lacking focus? And it's preventing me from creating momentum. What kind of momentum do I have right now that actually is fake? Meaning it is a distraction towards a movement that is taking me away from the path that I am meant to be on, with the understanding that I'm being called. And I'm calling you out right now. You're being called by name. You're being invited. These are all definitions of called, in order to fulfill your calling. And the calling is an invitation to feast. I want you to read Psalm 23. Okay? Because if you keep saying, well, I have a calling, but you're not living out the calling, I'm going to say that you're not being able to receive grace. You're not receiving by faith. You're not even able to, if the banquet table just appeared one day and maybe it's there right now, you don't feel like you can sit there. Why? Right? Why? So I got to go. I'm hopping on a call. I hope this was helpful. And do me a favor. Because we want to be people of action, right? I want you to take one action step. Whatever it is, I don't care what it is, because that's between you and God. But at the end of the day, I want you to come back here and I want you to report that you've done it. Just put done. Okay? That way you are being held accountable to yourself, which really is the most important, and to your maker, that whatever it is that you are called to do, whatever it is that you have been inspired and led to do, that you have taken the action necessary in order to start moving forward. So I don't care what it is. I don't need to know what it is unless you feel like you need to share, but come back in and put done. And that will allow you to know I'm taking the first step. And moment by moment is how we create true momentum, when we're aligned to our destiny, when we're aligned to our calling, and when we are ready to actually answer the invitation. And more importantly, the feast is there for us, right? The feast is there for us so that you're ready to eat. It's not enough to just be like, ooh, I have this invite and I'm never going to go to the ball. You're the guest of honor. Like Psalm 20, you're the guest of honor. It's your banquet. It's your table. So if you don't answer the call, then somebody else is going to. And I guarantee it's happening more and more and more and more. There is no time to waste. So take a moment, sit, reflect, pray, meditate on his word, listen to this back a few times if you need to, but I want you to come back and acknowledge that you've taken the action with done. Okay? We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.